Okay, here we are, finally. Only Golden Fingers Could Play So Heavy by Roger D. Linder. Chapter 4, 1951, Henry and Juliette. It seemed there was no luck for Henry, except bad luck. He sunk into a deep depression and missed several weeks of work. His boss was sympathetic, but needed Henry back on the job. After convincing him that Henry was absolutely essential to the operation of the hatchery, he returned to work. Although Henry was technically crippled, he did not let that deter him from doing a good job. Egg inspections continued without any problems. But Henry could no longer hold his .22 pistol, and shooting rats was no longer possible. But the rat problem persisted, and Henry turned his ingenuity to solving the problem once and for all. Noting that the rats tended to nest under the coops, he devised a tiny electrical fence that would maintain a steady current, greeting any unlucky rat that encountered it a nasty, often fatal shock. Before long, the rats were keeping clear of the henhouse altogether, and Henry's boss commended him on his invention. Once again, things were looking up. Outside of work, Henry liked to relax at home. They bought their first television set from a local appliance store, a giant 17-inch screen. Although it cost nearly a month's wages, the convenience of having it in their home and the envy of their house guests was incomparable. They were able to pick up a couple of local stations, although one of them was a bit snowy. They especially enjoyed watching the news, and their favorite newsman was Hardy Rochester, ruggedly handsome and a wise communicator. The IBC newscast was known as the up-and-coming information source of the day, and many tuned into it each evening. Their coverage of local events was unprecedented and set the standard for follow-on stations for years to come. On this particular evening, Hardy introduced a new sponsor, Fender Guitars. It seemed an unlikely arrangement until their first advertised product, the broadcaster, made the connection obvious. But when they also showcased the new Fender Precision bass, Henry took notice. He had always wanted to play bass, but disliked the upright and bulky basses seen so often in combos of the day. Henry longed to own the instrument, but he kept his desire to himself. He knew that even if he had it, it would be a challenge to play, considering his missing fingers. And the cost was another issue. How could he justify spending $300 so soon after purchasing the first television set? Henry mulled over it, over and over, running the figures, looking at future income, and finally broke down and brought it up with Juliette. While her response was not a direct no, she did not think it was a wise choice at the time. We need to be thinking about putting some money aside for the baby. Baby? Are you preggers? How? No, I'm not, but we need to plan ahead. It will change our lives. I won't be able to work anymore, and you might have to get a second job. But won't it be nice to have a little one around the house, she continued. Maybe so, but we're not ready now. We can barely afford the grocery bill. And so you want to buy a bass guitar rather than eat? Well, when you put it like that, I guess not. It will have to be a dream, unfulfilled for now, he declared wistfully. Henry put the thought of the bass guitar in the back of his mind, but never really forgot about it. He would continue to dream about the day when he would buy it and proudly be able to play in a band again. In the meantime, Henry continued to find pleasure tinkering in his workshop. Although it was a challenge, he was able to adapt certain tools so that he could use them despite his mangled hand. He found his left hand getting stronger, and his ability to use it for more precision work was improving. Henry was starting to develop a reputation as an inventor. His rat deflector had caught the interest of a local hardware store, and soon Henry was building them for sale to other local farmers and even some households that were plagued by the vile creatures. The materials were inexpensive, and Henry saw a little bit of profit from his hobby. He started stashing a little away for that rainy day. Juliette also enjoyed her job at the grocery. She arrived for work at 8:30 a.m. and opened the store for the first customers at 9 o'clock. She always had a friendly smile and enjoyed conversation with the regulars. A few of the older ladies frequently asked when she was going to have a baby. Although they meant well, Juliette grew tired of the constant prying, but took it in stride. She was on her own schedule, and the time was not right. Chapter 5, 1952, Greta. Henry and Juliette were excited to see that Governor Warren was a possible presidential candidate in this year's elections. But when he dropped out of the race to support General Eisenhower, Henry and Juliette followed suit and supported the new candidate as well. Although Juliette wasn't old enough to vote, Henry was looking forward to casting his first presidential vote. Juliette proudly wore her "I like Ike" button at the grocery store and drew some criticism from those customers that supported Governor Stevenson. Both Juliette and Henry liked to watch the TV ads for the campaigns and felt like they were part of the process, even though most of the action was on the East Coast. Hardy Rochester was at his peak in the reporting of the campaign and was nominated for several broadcasting awards, increasing his own stature as a newsman to watch. When Hardy announced the nomination of Eisenhower to be the party's candidate, it was one of his highest-rated airings. But outside the presidential race, both Henry's and Juliette's families were pressuring them to start a family. They were still not ready, but to appease the family, they capitulated and adopted Greta. Greta was beautiful, had blonde hair, and brought a touch of magic into the Mall household. Juliette would cradle her, and Henry enjoyed feeding her from a bottle, and before long, she was eating solid food. In the late summer, the three of them began taking long walks in the park, and Greta grew quickly. Before long, Henry and Greta would run in the park, and Greta would love to fetch the stick. She would come back, drop it at Henry's feet, then jump up in his lap and lick him in the face. Henry and Juliette loved Greta, and Greta loved to spend time with Henry at the hatchery. Greta would lie at his feet as he manned the conveyor belt, and occasionally chased after the brave rat that did not pay heed to the rat deflector and tried to enter the building. Sometimes Greta would sit and listen to the chickens cluck. It was as if they were having a conversation, and Greta was their silent confidant. One particular pair seemed to catch her fancy, and sometimes she would sit by their cage for hours on end. The crisp autumn lights were a real treat for the trio. Henry would set fire to the week's trash pile, and he and Juliette would sit in the swing, watching the flames flicker until the entire pile burnt down to a few embers. Greta would run excitedly around the fire while the flames were licking at the sky, so fierce, yet so beautiful. Eventually, she would calm down, move into a position by Henry and Juliette, and enjoy the ember glow together. The November elections came, and Henry proudly cast his vote for Eisenhower. By the next morning, the results were coming in, and it looked like a sure victory for their candidate. Chapter 6, 1953. I. It was March. A new president was in office, and spring weather was chasing away the winter doldrums. New life was rampant on the hatchery, and everywhere you went, blossoms were beginning to emerge on the trees, and flowers were starting to bloom. Henry and Juliette enjoyed the springtime, and especially enjoyed walking in the evening. They liked to go into town, have some dinner, and then go to a movie at the local theater. Playing at the Bijou was the story of three loves. Juliette loved romances and persuaded Henry to take her. While Henry generally enjoyed westerns, he was touched by the story, and when they returned home, the couple continued their romantic evening. By June, it was becoming obvious that Henry and Juliette were expecting. The families were ecstatic. "It's about time," they would exclaim, and summer was busy with planning for a nursery and shopping for baby clothes. "Do you want a boy or a girl?" curious inquirers would ask. Henry always answered, "It's a boy, no doubt about it." While Henry was so positive, Juliette wasn't as sure. "It could be a boy, but there's definitely something special about the baby. I can feel it." While Juliette grew, it became harder for her to do her job at the grocery store, and she finally relented and quit. Everyone was sorry to see her go, but now that she was home much of the time, there was a never-ending stream of visitors to see that she was doing well. The radio was a constant companion now that Henry had taken on a couple of extra shifts at the hatchery, and she was enjoying the new types of music that she was hearing. The baby was enjoying it as well, since it moved around every time the radio was on, almost as if it was dancing. September and October passed quickly, and once again a return to the cool autumn evenings of November. As Henry and Juliette sat by the week's trash burn after their Thanksgiving meal, Juliette felt a strange pang. "It's not time yet," she exclaimed. Henry quickly got on the phone and called Dr. Orson. "I'll be right over," the doctor offered. "It's probably nothing, but we'd better check just in case." When the doctor arrived, Juliette was not doing well. Her stomach was in pain, and the baby seemed agitated, moving about, kicking, and generally causing her discomfort. Dr. Orson took out his stethoscope and listened to Juliette's heart and also to the baby. "Everything sounds okay as far as I can tell," he declared. "Maybe it's just indigestion. Did you eat a lot today?" "I did have 2 extra helpings. Eating for 2, they say." "Well then, that's it. It's just a little overindulgent. It's an easy mistake for this time of year. Take a couple of Alka-Seltzer and you should be fine. Before long, you'll be feeling fine and the little one will settle down as well," the doctor advised. The next morning, Juliette did feel better, but she was ready to have the baby. Each day was increasingly more difficult for her to get around and for her to get into the car, even for her to sleep at night. To comfort her, Henry stayed home in the evening, dropping his extra shifts. Just past midnight on Thursday, December 3rd, the pain hit again. This time Juliette knew the time was right. They got into the car and headed to the hospital. Dr. Orson met them as Henry pulled into the parking lot and helped Henry with Juliette to get her inside. The pains were increasing almost to the point of her being unable to bear them, and then they would subside. This continued throughout the night, and Henry tried to comfort her as much as he could. When Juliette let out a shout louder than any previous, Henry concernedly asked, "Honey, how do you feel?" Juliette replied, "I feel that something special is about to happen." Henry continued, Is that really what you feel? Juliette, exhausted, simply replied, Yes, I feel that something is about to happen. With another great cry, the nurse rushed in and ordered Henry to the waiting room, while the nurse called for Dr. Orson, and they proceeded to the delivery room. Juliette was screaming. The nurse worked to calm her down, and Dr. Orson watched as the baby began to crown. The doctor tried to keep Juliette calm, and even though she was in great pain, he spoke to her calmly as the nurse swabbed her forehead with a damp cloth. Okay, try to push, he told her. The baby's coming. Juliette pushed some more, and suddenly it was over. The pain had ended, only to be replaced by more crying. But this time, it was not from Juliette. It's a boy, the doctor declared. You have a little king. Juliette burst into tears of joy and relief. She had a son. Tune in tomorrow for Chapter 7.